What happened to Irish republicanism? How did it go so wrong? Firstly, it is important to say that this has never been a war between communism and capitalism. Communism and capitalism are not equivalent to each other. Capitalism is an economic proposition only, whereas communism is an entire system of government. This is a war between communism and republicanism. In the last essay, I spoke about where republicanism came from, the principles of republicanism, and how we as individual republicans can exercise our power to ensure the continuation of the republic. In this essay, I will talk about the decline of Irish republicanism into the sorry state we see it today, and I will talk about how the people who call themselves Irish Republicans are on a path that is far from a Republican way of life. I am not an expert on Irish Republican history, but I can explain simply the concepts and events that got us to where we are today. I want to get into the minds and ideologies of the people who struggled to get us what they envisioned as a true Irish Republic. On the 24th of April 1916, the Irish rebels declared Ireland a republic. The founders, leaders and rebels of our Republican rising prescribed a set of principles for Ireland that had been established in ancient Greece and Rome. These republican principles had caused the British Empire a great deal of trouble at home and around the world. Both the English and Irish were aware of how badly things would go for them once the idea of the Irish Republic was broadcast to the world. Where would the people of that era go to send a message? The General Post Office. It was the internet of its day. Ireland's Republican rebels did not just want to send a message to the world of that time, but also they wanted to send a message to the generations of Irish that had yet to be born. The leaders of Ireland's rebels were a very diverse group. There were women, men, Protestant, Catholic, poor, well-off, socialist, capitalist, professionals, workers, homosexual, straight, able-bodied, and handicapped. Diversity was not an issue at the time of the founding of our state because all the leaders agreed that Ireland was to be a republic. Therefore, Ireland's rebels believed that their future was invested in the principles of republicanism. The new Irish Republican state would only conduct its business based on logic and reason. The Irish rebels that declared our republic knew that it was their sovereign individual rights, granted by a republican constitution, that all power of the new republic would be derived from. To declare a republic is one thing, to establish a functioning republic is another. The brutality imposed by the British on the Irish Republic's founders and rebels after the Rising led to Old Sinn Féin being very successful in local elections around the country. Old Sinn Féin then began to set up the administrative branches of government of the newly declared Irish Republic. The British could not let the establishment of the Irish Republic continue. They tried to crush the new republic with brutality. This brutality caused the Irish War of Independence. This was a guerrilla war fought between the old IRA and the British. The British knew the best way to weaken the guerrilla war and stop the establishment of the Irish Republic was to sow ideological division in the Republican Old IRA and the Republican Old Sinn Féin. The British proposed a treaty that would see the formation of an entity called the Irish Free State and the creation of a partitioned British statelet called Northern Ireland. This proposed treaty immediately caused ideological division in the old IRA and Old Sinn Féin. The larger of the two sides of this division viewed the treaty as an indirect pathway to the establishment of the Irish Republic. They became known as the Pro-Treatyists or the Free Staters and eventually became known as Cumann na Gael. The smaller of the two sides of this division were opposed to any treaty with the British, especially one that partitioned Ireland. They would become known as the anti-treatyist IRA, Sinn Féin, or simply the Republicans. The Free Staters at the time could see the British were a globalist superpower with a gigantic war machine, fresh off success in World War I. The Free Staters could see that the fledgling Irish Republican state would be doomed with the flick of the wrist by the Westminster government. Collins was faced with a choice. He was threatened by the British with that flick of the wrist, or he could choose the stroke of a pen, sign the treaty, partition Ireland, and set up the Irish Free State. The rights and wrongs of their decisions are not what this essay is about. The British secured their divide and conquer strategy when the British agreed to supply the pro-treaty Free Staters with advanced weaponry and equipment. The Civil War was fought with the Irish Republican Army and Cumann na Gael on one side, supporting the treaty, the Free State and the partition of the island, and on the other side was the IRA and Sinn Féin opposed to the treaty, the Free State and the partition of the island. The Civil War was a guerrilla war fought between those divided by the British living in poverty with poor supplies and those supported by the British living in relative comfort with good supplies. The pro-treaty Free Staters were able to rationalise their relatively comfortable, secure lifestyles and their killing of their brothers and sisters by saying that they would eventually establish a republic. The anti-treaty IRA and Sinn Féin justified their lives of poverty, insecurity, and their killing of their brothers and sisters by saying that they would never sign a treaty with the British and that they would establish a republic by means of force. The benefit of hindsight means we can look back now and see that the Irish Republican Army and Cumann na Gael Free Staters set in motion a train of events that would eventually lead to the establishment of the new state we call the Republic of Ireland. The only hindsight that was available to the IRA and Sinn Féin at the time were the memories of the slaughter of their brothers and sisters by both the British and subsequently the Irish Republican Army. The IRA and Sinn Féin also remembered the signing of the treaty with the British, which had divided Ireland's Republican movement. The Free State government, Cumann na Gael, led by Cosgrave, was in control of the Irish Republican Army, and De Valera, the IRA, and Sinn Féin were on the run. De Valera became convinced the IRA and Sinn Féin could never achieve a republic by force against the far better equipped Irish Republican Army. De Valera and his followers broke away from the Sinn Féin party and set up the Fianna Fáil party. De Valera wanted to get control of the already established Free State government from Cosgrave by the only means now possible, which was politics. De Valera did eventually get control of the Free State government, and he immediately set about diffusing the bitterness of his brothers in arms in the IRA and Sinn Féin. De Valera offered the IRA and the Sinn Féin members well-paid permanent jobs in the civil service and the Irish Free State bodies, such as the ESB, An Post and later CIE. Many in the IRA and Sinn Féin became more confident in the Free State's ability to achieve a republic when they saw their anti-treaty old Sinn Féin brother, De Valera, controlling the government of the Free State. They could also see that many Free State agents were attempting to get control of Northern Ireland and end partition. The IRA and Sinn Féin became more open to the Free State. All this progress led to a sense of peace on the island for many years, at least in the south. During all this time, Irish Republicans in the north were treated very harshly by the British authorities. This eventually gave rise to an Irish Republican civil rights movement in Northern Ireland. The civil rights movement in Northern Ireland was a true Republican movement. It was made up of people from many different ideological perspectives who sought to have equal status for all the citizens of Northern Ireland, and it employed the use of logical argument in negotiations and reasonable protest when negotiations did not work. The Republican civil rights movement in Derry had great victories through logical negotiation and reasonable protest. They had caused British Prime Minister O'Neill to begin to logically negotiate on the demand of one man, one vote. O'Neill said he needed more time to negotiate with Westminster on that demand. The Republican civil rights movement in Derry called a truce on protest marching for 1 month. When atheist communist students in Queen's University Belfast saw the slow, steady and great progress that their ideological enemy, constitutional republicanism, was making, they set up the Communist People's Democracy Party. These communists could see that they were losing control of the old trope of equality to constitutional republicans on both sides of the British-Irish divide. The Communist People's Democracy Party of Belfast began to agitate about the same things that communists all over the world agitate about, but always fail to deliver. Communists always talk about equality, but only ever achieve genocide. Republican societies, on the other hand, have always achieved equality through slow, steady and rigorous application of logic and reason. The Communist People's Democracy Party broke the marching truce with a march from Belfast to Derry. This protest march, led by communists, marched through Protestant areas along their route. They had no doubt seen what had happened when the Irish Republican marchers in Derry tried to march through Protestant areas and were repelled by the RUC and the supporters of Paisley. Very predictably, the communist-led protest march was attacked violently along the protest route as they passed through Protestant areas. Many of the protesters were seriously hurt. When the march eventually got to Derry, it barricaded itself into the bogside. News about the violent attacks on the marchers spread. The news from the protest resulted in a small contingent of communists agitating within the IRA and Sinn Féin. Their comrades had been attacked by the RUC and Protestants, and they wanted the IRA and Sinn Féin to respond. At the same time, the communists already in Derry and the communists from Belfast took control of the peaceful, logical and reasonable Republican civil rights group in Derry that had achieved so much. The IRA split again, and the Communist Provisional IRA was born. The Provisional IRA took control of Sinn Féin. The Provisional IRA, New Sinn Féin and the new civil rights movement of Northern Ireland were now all controlled by communists, socialists and Marxists. the Provisional IRA and New Sinn Féin set about attacking British forces in reprisal for atrocities that the British forces committed and colluded in during the Civil Rights Movement. The Provisional IRA and New Sinn Féin were isolated diplomatically, and they were also isolated from the modern weapons, equipment and finance that they needed to prosecute a war in Northern Ireland. They were plugged directly into international communism, and they looked around the world to see who they could solicit help from. They found help from other international communist organizations such as ETA and FARC, and they found help from extremist Islamists who shared their hatred of England and other worldwide constitutional republics. They also found help from naive Irish Americans who only saw their ancestors being slaughtered and oppressed. Largely, Irish Americans had no concept of the communist agenda now at play in Northern Irish politics. International communists connected with the Provisional IRA to FARC in South America, and that connection gave them access to weapons and cocaine. International extremist Muslims connected the Provisional IRA to Gaddafi in Libya. That connection gave them access to weapons and heroin. This extremist Islamic connection helped nurture the rationalizations and promotion of pedophilia that has now become so prominent in the policies of the Provisional IRA and Sinn Féin. The Provisional IRA and New Sinn Féin are what have been referring to themselves as Republicans in Ireland. No more, they are not Republicans. The first principle of Republicanism states that the Republic shall only use logic and reason in resolving the problems of the Republic. Both modern Sinn Féin and the Provisional IRA are rampant ideologues who have no respect for the process of problem resolution through logic and reason. This is demonstrated by their proselytizations of communism, Marxism and trans ideology. Their ideologies are exemplified by their members' violent threats and their failure to engage in both the political process of Stormont and the processes of logical and reasonable argument in any meaningful way. The second principle of Republican states that all the power of the state is derived from the power of the individual citizens of the Republic. Both New Sinn Féin and the Provisional IRA assert that Ireland should be a communist state. Communism and republicanism are the exact opposites of each other. Communism directly contradicts the second principle of republicanism when it says that all the power of the individual is derived from the state. It is this principle of communism that has led directly to the genocide of every population that has ever tried to govern the country with communism. We already know from their violence that both the New Sinn Féin and the Provisional IRA have the policies and infrastructure that make them capable of genocide. There is no pathway to united Ireland through the New Sinn Féin and Provisional IRA's policies of communism. Many Irish people are blind to the genocidal tendencies of communism, but loyalists, unionists and Northern Republicans are not. The only pathway to united Ireland is through constitutional republicanism, as both sides of the British-Irish divide already govern their countries using their own version of this system. Both Sinn Féin and the Provisional IRA are fascist, communists and drug dealers who believe that covering themselves in a thin veil of 32-county nationalism hides their true nature. Well, it doesn't. What it does do is make both Sinn Féin and the Provisional IRA an exact replica of Hitler's fascist, communist, drug-pushing, National Socialist, Nazi party. Sinn Féin and the Provisional IRA have hijacked the message our rebels sent us. When they push communism, they disgrace Ireland's Republican rebels and everything that they held to be true. Sinn Féin and the Provisional IRA insult the valiant efforts and self-sacrifice of our diverse Republican rebels that rose on the 24th of April 1916 to declare Ireland a republic.